picking up where we left off last week. Got this island ready for a second coat of finish. Almost. We're using some sandpaper just to soften up some of the raised grain. So a lot of times what happens is, even though you've sanded your faces nicely, you can get a little bit of roughness where certain patches of grain will just absorb a little bit of that finish. And especially because we're using a water-based finish for this, that can be a lot more prominent here. So I'm just using some really fine sandpaper. You can see here that this is 400 grit. And a little trick that I like to use when I'm sanding by hand is I'll fold it up like this so that my fingers can grab a little bit of that sandpaper too, so it doesn't slide out from underneath my fingers. Really want to get it thick on this bark here, just to keep little bits and things from falling off. I like to put a lot more coats, and nice heavy coats on this bark. Also got this guy right here. I showed you guys this in the garage tour, this monster of a chainsaw. I mean, just look at how big this thing is. There's so many teeth. So this is what I use for sawmilling. I use it to cut, surfboard. Use it to cut this slab back here, this really big guy. And since cutting that, and I have not sharpened it, so I've got this really cool 2-in-1 sharpener here. It's basically a set of files that's held into place. And the way that it works is you simply take it, set it on the tooth, just like that, and drag it across in order to cut this edge back right here and make this tooth really nice and sharp so that it'll cut cleanly through the wood that you're milling. So, getting this thing milled up before I give it back to the friend that lent it to me, and then we're gonna get this guy sent back to him and get this all put together and delivered after we get that final coat of finish.
2 hours later.
Finish is done. So the last step here is to attach this top. So I've actually just drilled 2 or 3 holes here and gone ahead and screwed this in. The main reason that I'm doing that is I don't want to get halfway around this drilling or pre-drilling and then have it shift a little bit, because then my holes won't line up. So I just went ahead and screwed this down with about 2 screws to keep it in place, and then I'm going to continue with doing the rest of the pre-drilling. Okay, it is finished. So I've got the top nice and attached here. And one thing that I appreciated is the people that I'm building this for, they're some good friends of mine. They wanted to be able to move this around. So it's gonna go in the center of their kitchen, but if they ever have guests over, they want to be able to move it around. So what we've done is decided to make those legs touch the ground. And over here, I've just got some short wheels. They're not swivel casters, they're just straight casters. And so what you can do is pick it up from this end, and it rolls around really nicely. So, let's go deliver this thing. Alright, I know I've talked about how big this sawmill is, covered it up in plastic because it's a tad rainy out. I want to keep it nice and dry so it doesn't rust, but guys, I have a 6.5 foot bed in my truck, and this thing does not fit straight. Like, it would stick through the tailgate. rainy delivery time.
Definitely need to get better at taking final shots. I ended up not being able to get any. It was raining, and I was trying to get back home, and so I had the owners of this now send me a couple shots. So there's a walk around and then also just a really pretty shot of it with some of their kitchen stuff on there.
This is called Kumiko, starts with a K. It is a Japanese style of woodworking and also of art, almost. So a lot of times what you'll see Kumiko in is either as a decoration or maybe you'll see it as like the face of a lantern or maybe a door for a cabinet or something like that. So I'm just experimenting with a couple different designs. And what I'm doing here with this panel today is I'm making these little pieces that go in here. So these will go on both sides. It'll almost create this diamond here. And in order to do that, we gotta cut 2 angles on each end of this piece. So there's this 22.5-degree angle, sorry. So the way that I'm cutting these tiny little pieces, you can see I've got a stack of these guys in process. These all have that 22.5-degree angle cut. And I'll get to cutting that 67.5-degree angle on the opposite end. But I'm not using my chop saw here, one, because the 67.5-degree angle is actually greater than what my chop saw will do. Most will go to about 50. This one is pretty cool. It actually goes to 60 on this side, but it's still not enough. And also cutting pieces that are that small, that tiny little angle, trying to hold on to this tiny little piece right next to this big blade, it's really not smart. There's a good chance that this will actually chip or break the wood, which could pull the wood away from my finger while I'm cutting. If I was holding it very close to the blade there, that's just really not safe. So I'm using what is called a jig. Now a jig is just some kind of device that is used to help you complete another process on a piece of wood. So these in particular are Kumiko jigs. You see I've got these 2 here, and then I've also got a third one here. And if you notice, each of these has a different angle on this face. So this is my 45-degree jig, this is my 22.5, and then this is the 67.5. So I've been doing a little bit of off-camera work here. This piece is really starting to come together. So these 2 quadrants here are now finished. That's what the final design is gonna look like. Just wanted to show you guys what I'm doing in order to get there. So if you look over on this side, I talked about that 22.5-degree angle. That's what we've got on each of these pieces here. And as you can see, they meet quite nicely together. And you'll notice that this side has a little notch cut into it, this bottom side right here. So the reason for that is what we're doing is we're taking this piece right here and we're putting it back in our 22.5-degree jig, but I'm flipping it over so that I can take off about half of it there. If we come over here, what you can see is those 2 22.5-degree angles, when put together, make this nice little 45-degree angle. So I can use my 45-degree jig to make this tiny little piece here and give me a nice snug fit to create that pattern there. So here's what the plan is. This guy in the center, these guys all around here, and then this pattern is going in the corners here. So I've got about half of this guy, and I've got these to cut. So let's finish out this center pattern first, because I've got my jigs set to be this length exactly to where they can friction fit in there. Okay. This stuff is really confusing sometimes, so I'm having to look up step by step. got one end of this 45 cut. I need to cut the other end here, and I've got my jig over there. That's my 45-degree jig set up to the right length, but I don't want to hand plane off all of this length right here. So I'm actually going to use this Japanese pull saw that So I haven't talked about hand planes with you guys yet, but essentially the way that the hand plane works is it's got a blade down in here that protrudes ever so slightly out of the bottom. And so it just takes off a tiny amount right there based on where this is set. So you've got a little knob back here that adjusts the depth of cut, how much this is going to take off. But the tricky part with this is I'm trying to match it to this face, this angle right here. And because this sticks out a little bit, it's really good for getting it close, but getting it dead set is difficult because now my blade, with this thing being shaved down, is starting to dig into this face. So typically what I've been doing is just switching to a chisel once I've gotten it mostly all the way down. And then I can come in and use the back of that chisel as a reference on this face. Alright, so I'm cutting the diagonals for the next pattern that I've got going on here, and this is almost the right length, but I need to adjust it just a little bit because I need to take off a tad more than that. So, I've got this sliding piece in here, and I just have a threaded insert below the screw, so I can just adjust this a tiny bit. Starting to come together. We've got these corner pieces are the last ones that we're working on. This is done. This is a really simple one. This one is a little more complicated, but we finished that out, or I finished that out yesterday. And we're working on this guy. So we've got this right here. This is just my concept sheet where I was looking at it, and I'm using this picture right here. This is the best guide that I can find for this pattern, which is called Gomagara. And what I want to do next is we've got all these cross pieces in here. I want to add this guy right here. That straight notch right there, and then there's a 45-degree notch there. So I want to measure this out. I'm going to step stop blocks on my fences here so that I can cut these over and over and over again, because I need to cut 4 of these pieces for each of these patterns. So I need to cut 16 total. got all of these cut, or at least I think most of them. I may have goofed up on a couple of these. One thing that's really tricky about this work right here, all of these, and this as well, is just when you have a bunch of stuff that almost becomes mindless, like you're doing the same cut over and over and over again, it's easy to lose track of what you've done. So I think there's a couple that I may have messed up. In order to get these half laps really accurate, I've just slid this in here so it's in the right spot, and I'm going to use a little scribing device. So scribing is just marking a small line, and this way I can get a really nice sharp line in here. So I'm pretty close here, but pretty close doesn't really cut it, pun intended, when we're working with stuff like this. So I'm just going to give this a little tap with this ruler down here to allow this to move down just a little bit. Let's check the fit of this guy. Got my half laps cut in there. Have all of our final parts cut here. I've got some stacked here, I've got some setting right here, and I've got the rest of them right here. So some of these, like this guy over here, fit in really nicely. Some of these are just a little bit off. As you can see right here, it's coming over this edge, so I need to shorten these a little bit. It's finished.
Hey! 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 Hey!
This thing is finally finished. This was meant to just be a test. And honestly, this probably took me at least 40 to 50 hours, if not more. And I really enjoyed it. I really did. It was a ton of fun. And this, what I've got right here, is just square Kumiko patterns. I've got a test piece over here for a hexagonal pattern. So if you were to add a line here, come up here, and then add a line here, you'll start to get a hexagon. That's the next. But I honestly plan to hang this somewhere in my house because it turned out so good. It's just simple geometric patterns, simple pieces of wood. The way that it just comes together is so clean and clear. It just makes me happy.